Hi all, welcome to this latest edition of Off the Post. Plenty to delve into in this week of football. Obviously the most notable part being the Manchester Derby, but we'll get into that in due course. There's a lot of goings on in the world of football over the last week, so we'll delve into this and just kind of see where it goes from there. So from a weekend review point of view, which we will start off with this week, Shoto Avaladze was sacked just before the Luton game, so the Hull manager is sacked, and so it wasn't a surprise to some, but I think a few people were of the mindset, well, why not sack him before the international break, get somebody new in, that way the team's able to basically in essence be a bit more prepared. And it maybe showed with losing to Luton, it could have been a different kettle of fish. If there was a new man in, there might have been the old manager's kick, as it were. But not to be, obviously. And obviously they've just the way it goes in the way of football, really. But yeah, Hull maybe wishes they had fought that one through just a little bit better. But yeah, it's just things like that. I don't usually understand why it happens, but yeah, that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. In terms of like other leagues that were quite interesting from the Friday night games, Porto kind of making an example of Braga, winning 4-1. Braga had not lost the game yet going into that game, and Porto needing the win to kind of keep on like Benfica's trail, as it were, and also kind of a common theme that we've seen in a lot of leagues this year is at least one or two surprise outfits. But Braga, if they'd won, would have went back to top of the table for the time being, but with Porto getting a resounding victory, it was almost like a reality check for Braga to say, from Porto to say, yeah, you're not quite ready for the challenge of the title just yet. But talking of Portugal, Casa Pia, who sit fourth at the moment, they've only lost one game. They've won 5, drawn 2, and lost 1. Sitting fourth, so fair play to them. This is rings echoes of Famalicão a couple of years ago, who were a surprise outfit, and people were like, who is this team? Like, people didn't really know of them, and like they were getting results. They were like basically challenging for the title basically up till Christmas, and like they did well. But it almost rings like this kind of way again. Also, Boa Vista is having above average season in their eyes, probably. Like, Boa Vista is like one of the historic clubs of Portugal. I remember many years ago, it would be about 20. It was 20 years ago, funnily enough. It would be when they had like a European run, and it was when Celtic beat them, and that was like, I think, the last time Boa Vista, if memory serves, were really like a really half decent team. There might have been, I'm sure there might have even been a period in between then, but they've not really been challenging like the top, say, 8 to 6 teams. Like, basically, so for them to be sitting in 5th just now is a nice sign to see. Yes, they've lost 3 games this season. Benfica and Famalicão being 2 of them in particular. The Famalicão won the 4-0 hammering at the weekend. Was certainly a shock to quite a few people's systems, especially since Famalicão going into the game were in the bottom 3. So certainly made for interesting viewing. And also going into that game, Famalicão had only scored 1 goal in 7 games and conceded 8, but suddenly makes the goal difference look a lot healthier, winning 4-0. And Portmanese, they're doing very impressive as well. They're also 5 wins and 3 losses, 2 losses in their last 5. Sporting and Vizela being 2 of their defeats. If they hadn't lost to Vizela at the weekend, they could have potentially been sitting in 4th. So it's little things like this that you say to yourself, well, like what this is when you see, so this is when certain teams just don't have, is it the depth or the consistency to say challenge in essence for like a European spot. Because this season it's quite interesting. Gil Vicente at 13th in the league after being very impressive last season. They were like the 5th best team in the league, and in essence at times they were quite they had a game to compete with the top 4, but this season it's just a different kettle of fish. Sporting obviously sitting 7th, which is quite startling to think, especially since they've lost to Chavez and to Boavista in those games. The Boavista game, it is worth noting, did kind of, I think because when they scored and it was taken off for VAR, kind of derailed them a little bit. But yeah, that's how I thought I'd give Portuguese league a bit of love this week, because it was one league that definitely caught my eyes when I was reading over league tables, other than say the big 5 leagues, as it were. What other leagues were standing out domestically at this time, and it's always good to kind of see that, really, when it's like another team just kind of standing out, and just makes it all the better, really. Like obviously when you go around like other leagues, Bilbao in Spain, like they were the Friday night game, and they seem to be challenging a little bit. It is important to note that when like they lost to Espanyol, the game they lost to Espanyol, they were all over them. They had like 20, they had so many shots on goal, and it wasn't happening. And Betis as well, they've kind of at times looked like they could threaten, but they've came unstuck. They came unstuck to Celta Vigo at the weekend, and it rings true of like how last season played out for Sevilla. Like Sevilla sit 17th at the moment. Sevilla last season were basically challenging Real Madrid bit for bit, and it was like Sevilla weren't losing games. They were either winning them, or when they weren't winning, they were always drawn, and they were just draw specialists. But Sevilla this season sit 17th, 1 win, 2 draws and 4 defeats. It's just like the Almeria game, which you would never expect, but I just don't really know what's going wrong this season. And for what I was reading in my notes, after Bruno Laga's sacking of the Wolves manager at the weekend, that Lopetegui could be going to Wolves. Possibly by the time this goes live, he might actually be there now, or not far away, because there is like talk of that happening. So yeah, that's definitely another one to factor in from there. But Barcelona and Real Madrid still sit top 2. Obviously Real Madrid drew at the weekend, 1-1. Benzema missed a penalty, and then they scored, but it was taken off for VAR not long after. So yeah, it was like Osasuna seem to be an interesting bunch this season. They seem to be able to get the odd result here or there to keep them going. Like obviously the 2 that they lost to Betis and Getafe respectively, which was probably not expected, but they certainly are giving it a good go. But obviously this weekend's games will certainly be interesting, like measuring stick for a few of the teams, just to see where they stand. But like Marseille, they definitely are looking like they can give PSG a bit of a fight, and I think a lot of it will come down to when they eventually probably have to get it on, as it were, like where at this point in the season and also later in the season, because it's going to be a real measuring stick. But Lorient, I've got something to say. Lens are definitely saying something as well. They are unbeaten still in 9 games. They've drawn 3. Like the 2 that they drew, Nantes and Reims, I wouldn't have had them for drawing either, personally. But like they're able to score and they're able to defend. But the 2 games, the 2 draws when I kind of look at it, I feel like they could have done a lot. Because I watched the Nantes game, I remember that a few weeks ago, and I thought they were all over them, and they just like Lafont has one of these. When Lafont has one of those games where he saves everything, and it drives teams mad, I think. But Lorient, they're going to be an interesting one simply because they don't have. If you've maybe heard it in a few podcasts, they've got a very impressive young Burkina Faso forward called Dango Utatara, and Utatara has certainly created a lot of attention. And I think it's also because the squad itself is a relatively young squad. There is bits of experience within the team, like some older heads, but it is a relatively young squad. Like Utatara has 4 goals this season. The biggest problem is he got sent off at the weekend, and it was a silly red card. And like Moffey has got 6 goals this season, and I'd imagine he'll keep chipping away. Lafay's been consistent. Ibrahim Kone, when he's had to come in, well, he's been playing as well. Has got goals. Like, do they kind of then say, well, Moffey and Kone? Because it'll be interesting how they suddenly have to reshape the team for that game, because it's their first red card of the season, and I'm not quite sure how much they adapt, really, as it were. Like what will make them be a bit more diligent in their play, really, because it's Brest at the weekend, and it should be in theory an easy win to keep the chase going. But this, in essence, now becomes like their first different test, as it were, because they've had Lyon, they beat Lyon. They've had Lille, they've beaten Lille. This type of test is different because, one, it's a bottom team that's in the relegation zone, but also a team, because they've lost one of their main players, how do they adapt? That is what's going to be interesting about Lorient. Like Marseille, they obviously have Ajaccio, who are just probably delighted that they're in the division. Like last year in Ligue 2, they were basically not conceding and not scoring. This season they've managed to score 5 goals from 9 games, which is a slight improvement, but they aren't getting results against other teams around them, or teams that the assumption that they would get results against. Like Clermont was one of these games where there was maybe an expectation that they could get a result, because Clermont's obviously in their like second season up, but not to be. But yeah, so Marseille should be comfortable. Reims is an interesting one for PSG, because obviously they're mixed bag at times, and like they might get a result, they might not. But it'll be interesting to see come the weekend, like post the weekend, if Lens can get a result against Lille, because at the moment the top 4 is literally just building up a considerable cushion. Monaco may sit 5th and they're 4 points behind, and they were the impressive team of the weekend, beating Nantes 4-1. But Lyon obviously have lost 4 on the spin. It's kind of worth noting with Lyon that the 4 that they've lost, maybe see 2 of the 4, there was maybe a slight expectation they'd maybe lose Monaco and PSG, but the Lyon game v PSG was very nip and tuck. But Lorient, obviously with how they're playing, it's just kind of derailed their season in a sense for Lyon, because obviously 4 losses on the spin, depending on how they might have went, they could have possibly been well over 20 points. But it's just one of those ones that you just say to yourself, well, just got to buck up your ideas, really. Bayern back to winning the ways after a bit of a kind of flat run, as it were. They hadn't won in 4, but they bounced back with a big win. beating Bayern Leverkusen, who are also having a rotten season. Just worse than Bayern by a considerable margin. They sit second bottom, 5 points to show. 9 goals is all they've scored this season, but they still they've conceded 16, which kind of tells you all you need to know. When they're drawing to Hertha and Werder Bremen, it does ask a bit of questions of them, like what's going wrong, because there would be an expectation that they should be beating Hertha and Werder Bremen, but it's not. Union Berlin, first loss of the weekend as well. They lost 2-0 to Eintracht Frankfurt, so that was almost like their reality check, as it were. And especially for like Dortmund, they lost again to Cologne 3-2. They had a chance to go top of the league and bottled that. So like, do they want to win the league? What baffles me with Dortmund is they've scored 11 goals but conceded 10. So you know what to expect with this Dortmund side, that they just don't have consistency. There's no consistency in this team whatsoever. 5 wins, 3 losses. Freiburg keeping the pressure on. Like, fair play to them. They've had, like, there's no expectations on them, like, if I'm honest. Like, they've got a resolute, like, goalie in Flecken. Like, defences, Gunter's shown maybe that he could be like the starting left back, maybe with challenging Raum at Leipzig for that kind of like left back position. But yeah, it's an interesting one really, like how the German league's playing out, because Hoffenheim, Eintracht Frankfurt, Cologne, like at the moment, realistically, everyone from 1st to 12th, well in their heads think, I could still have a chance here of not necessarily the title, but like a European spot, because there's only 6 points separates 12 teams, which is a nice thing to see if you're a neutral and you're just trying to keep up with the leagues. But yeah, no, it's been quite a nice journey in essence to kind of keep an eye on, really. Belgium, I think we should be speaking about Club Brugge, who domestically aren't top of the league, which we would think with how well they've been in Europe, because they've played 3 and they've won 3, but domestically they have won 7, drawn 1 and lost 2. And like, I think because they're doing so well in Europe that people would assume, oh, this team's playing really well in Europe. Like, what is going on? You'd think, oh, they'd be challenging for especially with 10 games played, you think, oh, there must be like 10 games played, 10 wins, but they're not. Antwerp, that was an interesting game. If you watched it the weekend, Kortrijk versus Antwerp, Didier Lankelzee used to play for Antwerp. He scored against them, or he assisted, sorry, and he did like the Haaland celebration, which kind of wound up the Antwerp supporters, to be honest, because if you know your history with Lankelzee, he's tried to force transfers over the years and at different clubs, and it just gets him in more trouble than it should. So it's not the most pleasant behaviour, but yeah, that was kind of an interesting game to kind of watch, and it got Kortrijk out the bottom 3. So, but saying that, all the bottom 3 were getting results bar Waregem. Cercle Brugge won a 7-goal thriller against Ghent. Serang got a result against Standard Liège 2-0. Eupen beat St Truden, and as we said, Kortrijk also got a result against Antwerp. So it made just kind of interesting viewing, really, that 4 of the bottom 5 all got wins, and it just made for like, interesting viewing that like the top, like the more established hierarchy, like Anderlecht sitting 10th, Ghent sitting 9th. Like Standard Liège, we've seen so many times over the years, have been challenging for the title. They sit 6th currently after their loss, but Union St Gilloise, or RUSG, whatever you want to call them, they sit 4th at the moment, so they're not showing last season was a complete fluke. Yes, they've got 3 losses, but Genk and Antwerp being 2 of those losses. It is worth noting as well that they have quite a bad defensive record, 17 goals scored but 14 conceded. But it's worth noting pretty much the whole division's defensive record is pretty shocking. the one that's most stands out actually when you look at the table is St Truden, who are in 11th. They've got 10 goals, 9 conceded, 10 goals scored, 9 conceded, but they're 3 wins, 4 draws, 3 losses. It's just the way it pans out, and it just makes all the difference for where you could end up basically being in the table. Because if they'd got a win at the weekend, St Truden, they could have been as high as 6. So it just swings and roundabouts in football, how it plays out. Austria, Salzburg getting a draw against Linz. That was, or LSK Linz if you want to be fully precise. Salzburg doesn't really hamper them because Sturm Graz are still 2 points behind in second. Linz obviously sitting third. Linz, I think, like LSK are probably looking to make amends after a few years ago with the whole COVID situation where they lost points due to apparently training before being allowed to, and also when the whole, like how the Austrian League splits, like everyone gets like the federation like deductions, so it's like wherever you're from, and it just put LSK even further behind Salzburg before they started. So it just made it a lot harder for them, and I think part of that they may want to be trying to make amends. It is worth noting as well that for LSK that the last 4 games have been abysmal for them, because they drew to Reed, who were bottom of the league. They drew with Lustenau, who obviously are the promoted side. They got hammered to Tyrol 4-1, which I don't think many people would expect, especially with Tyrol getting hammered 5-0 at the weekend there, and then bagging a big draw against Salzburg. So it's like, you see yourself, you're losing at bottom of the league, you draw to a promoted team, then you get hammered to one of the other bottom sides, and then you draw with top of the league, basically the established firepower, as it were, whatever you want to call them, like the dominant team of the league. But Sturm Graz and LSK, they're only 4 points, 2 and 4 points behind respectively. Obviously, with how the league works, with they play like each other several times, it can feel a bit tedious. We kind of go the same format, but it is what it is. Croatian League, for those that keep an eye on that, it's just been kind of like office as usual for Dynamo Zagreb. They're 11 points clear already, and there's been 10 games played only for Hajduk Split. The only what's handy for them is they've got Gorica as their game in hand. What is most interesting about the Croatian League is that Rijeka, who were for so many years, especially in recent times, have been seen as like the third, fourth force of the Croatian League, but they're bottom of the league with 6 points. Because they usually it's been in recent years, it's been like Zagreb, Dynamo Zagreb, Hajduk Split, Osijek and Rijeka. They're kind of been like your main 4 teams. And like for Dynamo Zagreb to be basically 11 points clear already is, you just say to yourself, like, what is it going to take for them to kind of just get caught up, really, because nobody's got an answer for them at the moment, and that's quite evident when you kind of break it all down. But it just makes the chase sometimes a little bit more exciting. With the Czech League, just kind of business with usual, really. The big 3, Plzeň, Slavia Prague, Sparta Prague, they're just pretty comfortable. Nothing really else to kind of say with there. Cypriot League, for those that keep up with that, especially because of like Europa League and the Conference League. Arnafosis, Famagusta, they sit in 9th. I remember years ago they were an interesting outfit. Olympia Nicosia, Limassol, Apoel Nicosia, Ammonia, Apollon Aris at top of the league just now, which is probably a bit of a surprise. but Ammonia under Neil Lennon's a bit of an interesting outfit. They've only played like 5 games. Feels quite weird. We're in October and we've only played 5 games. It just feels weird, but yeah, that's how that plays out. Obviously in England there was a lot of derbies. As it were, like, well, North London derby with Arsenal taking Tottenham to task. That was another big test for them after Arsenal came unstuck against Man United a few weeks ago. But they've bounced back since then. Still sit a point clear of Man City, who took Man United to the cleaners 6-3, and Haaland, Foden, De Bruyne running the show there. Haaland breaking the record for basically 3 Premier League hat-tricks at home in a row, basically. So it's like, which takes in 3 consecutive home games to get a hat-trick takes a bit of doing. So fair play, like with that one. And obviously the it's like the quickest to 3 hat-tricks, I believe, as well, or something. It was like the record. Owen had like the record at 48 games or something. Haaland's done it in 8. It's like, well, that record will never be. You would have seen it, so 48 games. You could maybe see that's maybe a hard record to break. Well, Haaland broke it in 8 games, and I think he's already like 14 for the season. And like Shearer's record is what they're already talking. They're saying, like, could it be gone by the start of the year kind of attitude. That's what people are thinking because of how many games that they're going to be churning out between now and say the start of the year. Could that go, despite the World Cup being in effect as well? So it's almost like they're thinking, oh, Haaland's going to get a hat-trick every week, but some teams, they might come unstuck against you, never know. Like, they might have a plan that's got Haaland beat. Like, I'm surprised nobody's made the argument of like, well, why not just put everybody on the line? As long as you're not touching the posts or whatever, just make sure that you do what was within the rules and just get away with it. But Bournemouth and Brentford was a 0-0, Chelsea 2-1, Newcastle were on right in the end, 4-1. Fulham game came under scrutiny because Shalba got sent off very early, and people were questioning if VAR was at fault again for poor officiating. Liverpool, don't know what's going on with them. Another draw, 3-3 this time. They've done all the hard work getting the lead after being behind at half time to then concede in the 83rd minute with Trossard getting a hat-trick. The biggest point of it as well is Trent at the moment, it's almost like defensively he doesn't know. It's like he can't defend at all, and people just seem to exploit this more and more. Everton suddenly finding a bit of form, 2-1 victory against Southampton, unbeaten in 5, so fair play to them. It's like, yes, it's 3 draws and 2 wins, but for a win's a win. If you keep yourself unbeaten regardless of who you're playing, if by end of the season you're going to see the top half of the table, you're laughing. Obviously Leicester taking Nottingham Forest to the cleaners, 4-0. Gets Leicester off the bottom. It's startling to think that Leicester have scored 14 goals in 8 games but have conceded 22. That's kind of just, it's baffling because of, especially with 11 of those goals coming in 2 games, 6-2 against Tottenham and 5-2 against Brighton. So they're able to score but they just can't defend. But Nottingham Forest, possibly by the time this is live, Cooper's away. Rafa Benitez's talk of being the manager for Nottingham Forest for the rest of the season. See how that one plays out. Preston, if you're a Championship fan, this is the funniest story going in football at the moment. Like, if you follow any form of football, they've played 11 games, they've scored 3 goals and only conceded 4. There was just, somebody's breaking this down and said they've broken all forms of football. This is unbelievable. And what makes it all the more startling is the game that they lost, but prior to the international break against Sheffield United, they conceded twice. It was like, well, this is the first game they've conceded more than a goal. but they've only won twice. They've drawn 7 and lost twice. So it's like, how on earth is this happening? Like, the thing is as well, the games that they've lost, like they lost to Birmingham a month ago. As I said, Burnley, obviously they're an established outfit, so you can understand that. Sheffield United, they're obviously trying to challenge to go back up, and also Sunderland, they're aspiring to get back in the Premier League. But it's brilliant. It's just like, how is this happening? To only score 3 goals in 11 games all season, and like they're not having lots of shots, but they're having enough on target that you would say, well, surely they can at least get a goal, but they're not. It's just like, what is going on? It's great to actually kind of see how it's playing out. But in terms of like the league in general, like Sheffield United at the moment, like, because obviously the teams play midweek as well just now. In Sheffield United's case, their cushion that they had on like Norwich and Reading and others has just kind of evaporated over the last couple of games, because they drew at Birmingham at the weekend and they lost to QPR last night. So yeah, there's been a bit of a fall, not necessarily fall from grace, but it's just that cushion. It makes all the difference, especially at these points of the season when you're playing twice a week. Bristol City, they're kind of falling a bit flat, because obviously their last 4 games, 3 losses, 1 draw. Sunderland, obviously they can kind of feel the same, but with 3 draws. But Reading's an interesting bunch, sitting in 3rd. But yeah, it's going to be like West Brom. Obviously, I think they've got more questions than answers. Obviously, Middlesbrough sacked Wilder. West Brom, as far as I believe, will probably sack Bruce if he's not gone on yet already. Coventry's just not having a great season either. Obviously, their form the last 4 games, it's kind of turned around a little bit. They still have games in hand on everyone's, because obviously games weren't allowed to be played in the ground. They have like 2, or in some teams' cases 3 games, which kind of can make a difference. Can get them, especially if they were, when the 2 games in hand would put them up to about say 15th, 16th, but when 3 games in hand, you're suddenly looking at like say 10th, 11th, 12th, and that would make all the difference. It would make your season look a lot more attractive if you can get a wee run going. Like League One, Plymouth continue to be very, very impressive. Obviously sit top of the league, Ipswich close behind. Sheffield Wednesday and Portsmouth come unstuck respectively at the weekend and last night in Sheffield Wednesday's case. But yeah, they've got a cushion on everyone else, which is important, namely like Sheffield Wednesday, Portsmouth, Barnsley, Peterborough, Derby. Like, having gaps on those kind of teams already is going to make all the difference come if they hit a bad patch at any point. But at the moment, Ipswich have only lost 1 game, Plymouth twice, but the difference is they've got the wins that matters, whereas other teams have drawn or lost respectively, especially Peterborough, who've lost 5 times this season with 6 wins. So there's no, like, with them, you know what to expect. It's either going to be a win or a loss, not a draw. Burton, they obviously won at the weekend, but then lost to Fleetwood last night. So they've done all the hard work at the weekend to try and give themselves maybe that little bolt that they need, but Fleetwood said otherwise. Forest Green, obviously, and Morecambe, Bristol Rovers, bottom 4. For me, part of me wouldn't like to see Forest Green or Burton go down, because I've like both of them. I'd like to see at least, like in Forest Green's case, you don't want to, like I say, you'd like them to at least stay up to after all the hard work that they've done to try and get up in the first place after. But long way to go. Still 35 games, 35 to 36 games, depending on where you are in the league table. League 2, nothing really has changed much over the last few weeks. Northampton obviously losing last night dented them a little bit, but Leyton Orient, Stevenage top 2. Who would have said? It goes back to the argument was it pre-COVID or something, that when Stevenage didn't get relegated, at the time they were seen as the worst team in England, and now they're second in League 2, which is quite startling to see. Swings and roundabouts, but yeah, there's nothing like Barrow obviously having a bit of a bad patch with 2 losses in their last 3 losses out of the last 5. Yes, they've got 2 wins in there, but it's not ideal. Bradford under Mark Hughes, definitely up there. This is what the owners were probably finally expecting, that they're actually challenging for promotion. Yes, they're in the playoff spots at the moment, 5 points behind Northampton, but a game in hand, and there's probably hope and optimism to say, well, Northampton lost, we've got a game in hand, we can suddenly be 2 points behind them, and only if we win our game in hand. Obviously, Leyton Orient have a game in hand as well. Depending how that plays, you might say, well, even if at most you're still 7 points behind, it's still attainable because it's only a couple of wins, and especially if you were to beat them. That's the way to look at it. Obviously, for the non-National League fans, Notts County now sit top. Chesterfield lost 2 in the spin. Wrexham lost as well, which was against Notts County last night. So definitely an interesting turn of events, because Chesterfield were comfortable at the top of the league, but Notts County have said otherwise. Bottom of the end of the table, Torquay, Scunthorpe, Yeovil. If I'm honest, I would not have said those 3, or at least 3 of those 4. I think maybe even Aldershot might have not even had in that bottom 4. But Scunthorpe, I believe there's problems going on within. Yeovil, they've just never recovered after going all the way up into the Championship and then fall from grace from there. But that's football for you. In terms of other divisions, to kind of give a bit of love as well, second tier of France, Ligue 2, St Etienne still sitting in the relegation places. That's kind of that's really the main talking point really from there. Just with how that, because I think people didn't expect St Etienne to be where they are, whereas Bordeaux, with the financial problems that they're having, sit top of the league. So you almost feel like it should be the other way around, because there was talk of Bordeaux getting relegated to the 3rd tier, but they're showing, despite this, that they can get on with their football and maybe try and bounce back. So you never know with that one. So fair play to Bordeaux on being able to kind of adapt. Hamburg seem to be at the moment running away with it. They are 3 points clear, then 5 clear of Paderborn, and then 7 clear of Dusseldorf and Heidenheim and Hanover. So, and they scored one of the impressive goals of the weekend. So Hamburg certainly might finally be getting there. A long way to go still, obviously, but Arminia Bielefeld and Gruer Fürth, who would have had them as the bottom 2, especially if just being relegated from the Bundesliga. But football was a strange one. Kaiserslautern shown no kind of ill effects yet, but they've drawn 5 in the spin. They've only lost once, but they've drawn 5 in the spin. Braunschweig, Heidenheim, Darmstadt, Sandhausen, and a 4-4 cracker against Magdeburg. So they've definitely got questions to be asked. If they can get a few wins on the board on top of the draws, it might help their case. But long way to go still with any division. Over to Italy. In fact, I'll give the 3rd tier of Germany some love as well, only fair. 1860 Munich still sit top. Elversberg lost, which didn't their cause. But Freiburg's second team challenging up there, Saarbrücken, certainly would like to try and make amends on last season's collapse and try and get up automatically. Vine obviously seem to just be a yo-yo team. Dresden kind of feels the same in a sense, but we'll see how it goes. But Dortmund's second team, they sit obviously third bottom at the moment. Not ideal for them, but a long way to go, as we said. Greece obviously had quite a few derbies at the weekend there. Panathinaikos sit top. Olympiakos obviously sit third. Like their first loss, I think, in the league in God knows how long. But they sacked Carlos Colbaran like last week or whatever. But Panathinaikos played 6-1-6. AEK Athens 6 points behind. But PAOK obviously sitting fifth. Volos kind of upsetting the apple cart in a sense. So, but fair play. It makes all the more interesting that Panathinaikos can just keep the form going, and like it just makes it all the more interesting if someone like between the it's just been like a 4-team league for long enough. You always get like say Atromitos or Asteras, Tripolis, something maybe getting like a European spot, but you're so used to the big four, as it were, just kind of just running away with it. Inter, obviously losing to Roma, putting them down into 9th, which I think a lot of people would not have said at the start of the season. But Napoli, test after test, whether it be domestically or in Europe, seem to be overcoming it. Obviously sit top of the league still with 20 points, 6 wins, 2 draws. Atalanta keeping with them. Udinese as well. Udinese coming from behind against Verona. After an impressive Josh Doig goal again. Josh Doig showing a bit of good form in his last. He's got 2 goals, 1 assist in his last 4 games, which is nice to see. But obviously Verona in the bottom 3 at the moment. But Napoli, Atalanta, Udinese, I don't think a lot of people would have had as their top 3. Lazio still sit 4th, AC Milan sit 5th. AS Roma obviously sitting 6th, Juve 7th, Sassuolo 8th, Inter sit 9th. But yeah, there's questions to be asked, and it will be interesting come this weekend because like Udinese, Atalanta could determine who maybe sits second, who sits top, because Cremon's, yes, they may be second bottom, but they've shown to be a stubborn outfit against everyone so far, despite how a lot of the results have panned out, namely like against Lazio and Inter respectively. But we'll see how that one plays out. Serie B, for the fans of that, Regina lost at the weekend. They had a cushion, and that cushion was gone, same as Brescia. But Genoa keeping up there. Parma's starting to get a little bit of a run. Palermo not really firing as expected. Benevento in the bottom half along with Venezia, 13th and 14th respectively. And Calgary sitting 9th. But a long way to go with how that's playing out. Netherlands, if you're a fan of the Eredivisie, PSV got hammered 3-0, which I would not have said against Cambuur. But fair play. Alkmaar sit top. Ajax sit second, who have lost and drawn in the last 2 games. Ajax had plenty of shots against Go Ahead Eagles. Go Ahead Eagles only had 3 shots all game, and the one that they scored was their only shot on target. That's kind of tells you all you need to know. Feyenoord drawing against Nek Nijmegen, denting their title credentials as well. They could have snuck into 3rd, but not to be. 20 sit 5th, Heerenveen 6th, Utrecht 7th. Volendam, Vitesse obviously sit 3rd bottom, which I think a lot of people would not have predicted at the start of the season. But is what it is. Norway, for those that like to keep up with that, Molde 15 points clear this season of Bodo Glimt. Bodo Glimt not as all firing as the last couple of seasons. Molde only 2 losses all season, 19 wins, 3 draws. Rosenborg's at third, but definitely European battles, certainly between Lillestrøm, Vålerenga, so Rosenborg and Bodo Glimt. So it's definitely going to be interesting how those 4 teams play out. Long way to go still, but it's going to be an interesting little battle to kind of see who takes those European spots. Relegation kind of looks kind of signed, sealed and delivered for Jerv and Christensen, despite Christensen winning 3 out of their last 5. But I feel Sandefjord and HamKam and Eilsland maybe just a bit too far away now, maybe, but long way to go still. Long way to go still. Fans of the Polish League, Lech Poznan, Liga, Warsaw was the big game of the weekend. Lots of yellow cards in the game, and even a red card for Jerdziak. But Liga still sits second, Lech Poznan sit down in 10th. Yeah, it's a kind of turbulent one. Lechia Gdansk, who would have had them bottom of the league? Even like when you look at some of the other teams in the bottom half, like Gornik Zerberi, Plaskiewicz, Slask Warcraw, you wouldn't have had any of these teams. Even you can go as high as Lech Poznan. None of these teams you would have realistically thought would be in the bottom half of the table. But Pogon, Wisla, Rako, Cracovia, Wizru's Lodge, obviously rolling back the years. Interesting one there. Over in Scotland, obviously Celtic having a difficult game against Motherwell. Rangers taking Hearts to the cleaners, even with Rangers having to deal with 10 men of Hearts. Hibs, big impressive victory against Ross County. Ryan Porteous ending the week on a high with a very impressive performance there. St Mirren, if you've done a bit of reading on St Mirren, they could be dancing with the devils, as it were. They're kind of throwing a lot at it to try, and it's almost like not just see like a top 6, but it's like a European spot, and that could bounce back on them. It's only for what I've read, which is quite interesting. I wouldn't have thought that would be like the case, but yes, Hibs at the moment going on a little run, 3 wins in a row. They obviously have Motherwell this weekend coming, which hopefully they can get a result at home, and then they play against Celtic, which will be another acid test, especially if they can go in with 4 wins in the trot against Celtic. It would be an interesting one depending how that plays out, but it makes for good viewing if you're a fan of like these leagues. Over in Turkey, Galatasaray and Adana Demirspor obviously holding out each other to a 0-0 draw. Besiktas Fenerbahce was the big game of the weekend. That was a 0-0 draw, which I'm sure excited a few people. Sivasspor sit third bottom, and it makes it all the more interesting with them having European commitments as well. They haven't won a game yet. 4 draws, 4 losses. Definitely got to buck up their ideas. Trabzonspor sit 5th, but Konyaspor is probably the surprising team of the bunch at the moment, sitting 3rd. Istanbul Besiktas sit top of the league at the moment, tied with Adana Demirspor, Konyaspor and Galatasaray. In like Adana Demirspor's case, what's all the more impressive is because they had Balotelli last season for quite a lot of their goals, but this season they've got like Artem Zhuba in, they've got Onyekuru. They've like a lot of the leagues, like a lot of the teams in the league, they've just done a lot of business. Like Galatasaray have done a lot of business, like Juan Mata, Rashica, Sergio Oliveira, Hertz Seferovic, Dries Mertens, Lucas Torreira, Midso, Dubois. They've really went to town, and Icardi as well, I should remind. They've really went to town on just trying to give the team like a lot of depth everywhere. Like fair play to them for doing it, and it makes all the difference. Like Shakhtar, running right against Metlis Kharkiv 6-1. But they need Pro. They've got a game in hand. If they can get the result there, it would put them back to top of the league. Even if they were to draw, they would still be top on goal difference, because they've played 4, won 4, scored 11 with no goals conceded, which is fair play. Dynamo Kiev is the interesting one, but obviously that is the game in hand, and they have won 2, lost 2. Or is it the game in hand? It might be, because they've already played the Dnipro. So yeah, that was an interesting one when I read that in my notes as well about the Ukrainian league. But obviously they're playing their games in Poland. MLS, if you keep up to date with that, the Eastern Conference, Philadelphia Union losing at the weekend 4-0 to Charlotte. It brings Montreal back in after they got a result against DC United. So Charlotte obviously sit 9th. DC United bottom the league by some margin. Toronto, despite having like Insigne and whatnot, it's not happening for them. But Philadelphia, top of the league in the Eastern Conference, despite how that kind of played out, really, because try that again. Their last 2 games, it's been a loss and a draw. So the cushion that they had, they've just kind of let everyone back in. And obviously for a Western Conference fan, Los Angeles FC or LAFC, 12 points clear of Austin, who have looked very impressive at points throughout the season with like Driussi, who, if I'm honest, is kind of showing why Zenit in the first place spent big money on him. And also Austin spent big money on getting him in the first place, so he's kind of proving his transfer value. But top 5 in the Western Conference are all sealed for the playoffs. LAFC, Austin, Dallas, LA Galaxy and Nashville all signed, sealed, delivered. It is worth noting that LAFC are in the quarterfinals for the playoffs, but obviously all the other teams that have signed, sealed, delivered at the moment are sealed up for like the last 16, as it were, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Minnesota having a bad run of form when it matters, kind of going from, in essence, like 3rd all the way down to 7th, no winning 5. Luckily Real Salt Lake are having a bad run as well, but Vancouver definitely sneaking up there with 3 wins in the spin. So you never know with how it's all kind of playing out. Someone could just sneak in and just kind of take those kind of like last couple of spots in the playoffs. So wrapping up onto the European adventures, Bayern Munich running riot against Plzen 5-0, which I think a few of us would have predicted. Marseille would not have had hammering Sporting 4-1, but Marseille have shown domestically to be impressive. In Europe so far, it's been a mixed bag. Sporting obviously losing their first game in the group, but brought Tottenham and Eintracht Frankfurt back into it a little bit. But because that was a 0-0 Boarfest, it didn't help really either. All it did was give Eintracht Frankfurt a cushion on Marseille, and Tottenham the same applies really. But it did bring back my argument of it being a very open group, so I'm quite happy with that. Result of the night went at Napoli, winning 6-1 against Ajax. Tadic misses the second game. Everyone running riot really against Ajax, from Raspadori to Di Lorenzo to Zielinski to Kvaratskhelia, Simeone, Zambo Anguissa. They all ran riot. So yeah, it was kind of like a real statement of intent. So fair play to Napoli for doing that. Club Brugge just continuing to be very, very impressive. They're almost signed, sealed, delivered for getting through the group. With 3 games to go, they've won the difference is that they've won 3, everyone else has only won 1. Like Atletico won on opening day against Porto, but have since lost to Bayer Leverkusen and Bruges respectively. Bayer Leverkusen have got a result obviously against Atletico, but have lost to Bruges and Porto respectively, whereas Porto obviously have beaten Bayer Leverkusen but lost to Bruges and Atletico respectively. It's funny how this group's played out, but 3 games to go. Bruges should be comfortable. Everyone would have thought that they would be bottom of the group, myself included. I genuinely thought they might have been 4th or 3rd, but they've shown, no, we're here to make a statement and we're top of the group. We should get through regardless of maybe how next week plays out or even the next 3 games play out. They might still have enough with 9 points, because the other 3 have not shown any form of consistency. Inter Barcelona, Inter taking their domestic form out the window well and truly. Barcelona, who, like, this was a group of death because it was Barca, Inter, Barca, Inter, Bayern. Barca obviously coming unstuck in 2 games now to Inter and Bayern respectively. But Inter sits second, Bayern still comfortably top of the group. Please then, so obviously bottom of the group quite crushingly. But reverse fixtures will be interesting if Inter can get any result in the Nou Camp. Bayern could seal their qualification against in the group if they can get a result against Pleasant, because I would imagine, saying that, if Inter were to win and Bayern were to win, then that's the group sign sealed and delivered near enough. So we'll see how this one plays out. Obviously Liverpool Rangers. Our Rangers are on apparently record to be potentially the worst Champions League, which I would have thought, I can see why, because of 9 goals conceded. But at the same time, I'm sure there's been like other teams that have had like just as equally bad records. But long way to go, obviously, in the way that is shaping up. Motherwell ran riot against Ross County 5-0. So Hibs will certainly have to take note. Van Veen with a hat-trick. So fair play to him with that. Putting him up there to 7 for the season. But obviously this was a result that Ross County fans will not be delighted with. Obviously tonight's obviously run of games in the Champions League will take centre stage. Kilmarnock St Johnstone as well for Scotland as well, so that's another game to keep an eye on. I should give some attention to Chinese Super League as well. The interesting story from it, going into if you would say the international break, the Chinese Super League, Wuhan Freetowns had not lost a game. They hadn't lost in 17 games. They had won 15 and drawn 2. They have now lost 2 in the spin to Kangzhou and to Zhejiang respectively. And now suddenly Shandong Taishan suddenly have half a chance of maybe getting back into it, the title race, all because of how other teams have done. But obviously, from the league in general, the bottom 3, to a lot of people's eyes, would still not have been expected of Hebei, Guangzhou City and Guangzhou FC. All 3 have, like, over the years been quite respective forces within the league, with players that they've had over the years, from like Zahavi, Alex Teixeira, and Paulinho and whatnot. But nowadays it's not been that way, and Shanghai Port still sitting 4th, obviously still with Oscar in the squad. Beijing Guan still sitting 8th these days, but it's an interesting one how the Chinese Super League kind of plays out, and obviously Championship again tonight. But for me, in terms of Champions League for this week, I would for tonight's games, Leipzig and Dynamo Zagreb, I think we'll get the wins. In terms of the rest of the games, PSG I feel will get a result against Benfica. Chelsea maybe just edge out AC Milan. Juventus should get a result comfortably against Maccabi Haifa. the question with Man City is how many will they score? That is the question. I have predicted 8 goals will be scored by Man City against Copenhagen. I genuinely feel Man City are going to run a riot, and it's almost then like could be seen as embarrassing, and that's what could be. Real Madrid Shakhtar could go either way. If I'm honest, like Shakhtar seem to be up for it. Mudryk, showing why that he's highly touted. Real Madrid certainly will look to bounce back after the weekend. Sevilla Dortmund, who knows what to expect? Like that is honestly that in a nutshell, and I genuinely mean that. Europa League and Conference League respectively, plenty to get your teeth into for both competitions, because obviously they play all their games in one night. So Red Star Belgrade, Ferencvaros. I think Ferencvaros will continue to upset the apple cart, like they sit obviously going into this top of the group, which a lot of people would not have expected, but they've got results against Monaco and Trabzonspor when it matters, so fair play to them. And Red Star Belgrade now becomes the game that they should be expected to get a result against. HJK Ludogorets could go either way. Union Berlin might just have enough for Malmo. Trabzonspor Monaco could go either way. Manchester United Ammonia will be interesting because of Neil Lennon, first visit back to Britain, to a British club. Sociedad Sheriff, if I'm honest, I think Real Sociedad should have enough, but Real Sheriff, who knows. Lazio should have enough over Sturm Graz. PSV Zurich, I would say PSV should just have enough. Arsenal domestically should have domestic form should show enough over Bodo Glimt. Roma Betis probably the game of the night, if I'm honest. When you look at both competitions, and I think that could easily go either way. Braga Union St. Galois, I think Braga may just nick that one. Fenerbahce should have enough over AEK Larnaca. Freiburg Nantes, another big game of the night, could go either way, but I think Freiburg should just have enough. Mitchell and Feyenoord should just have enough. Olympiacos maybe just enough over Qarabag. Rennes then will Kiev, another tasty game. Rennes probably just edged that. The game of the Conference League of the night probably goes to Anderlecht versus West Ham, simply because of both teams' pedigrees, if I'm honest. West Ham probably should have enough to keep their top of the group credentials alive. The Dnipro Vaduz, the Dnipro looking very strong domestically, and I think that will keep translating here. Lech Poznan, Hapoel Beersheva could go either way. Molde should have enough for Shamrock Rovers. Punic Yerevan Zalgiris could go either way. Silkeborg, Steaua Bucharest, I would say Steaua Bucharest may just edge that one. Sivasspor, Balakani, with how Sivasspor have been domestically, Sivasspor might just edge this, but it's going to be an interesting one nonetheless. Nice, Slovako, Nice should have enough. AZ Alkmaar should have enough over Apollon. Basel v Slovan Bratislava, Basel should have enough. Cologne should have enough over Partizan. Ghent just over Deutsche Gardens. Fiorentina should have enough over Hearts. RFS should get found out against Besiktas. Slavia Prague should have enough over Cluj, and Villarreal should have enough over Austria Vienna. But yeah, we'll see how this one kind of plays out really over like the coming nights, as it were. And as I said, we'll see how the weekend plays out. Obviously, if there's any new managers coming in and whatnot, and if Man City get results against Southampton, and just really see from there really. But it's going to be fun and games to be had come the weekend. But let me know, folks, your thoughts for the weekend ahead. Any games stand out for you that excites you, and we'll just take it from there really. So have a good one, folks. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you all later.